Hello, it's Wednesday, the 21st of May, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me in the studio today is Charles Malet. By video link, we have Vanessa Beeley and Sandi Adams. Welcome to the programme, everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Now, later in the programme, we're going to be covering the Lucy Connelly case, health and AI, and the Middle East. But we'll begin with Brexit without the exit, because the dirty deal is done. And here are the three stooges. Keir Starmer, our illustrious Prime Minister, is flanked by two of the EU's three presidents, because who needs only one? So we've got Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, on the left, and Antonio Costa, President of the European Council, on the right. Now, the deal will, according to Starmer, deliver on his core mission to grow the economy, back British jobs, and put more money in people's pockets. That's so exciting. Except that was never the core mission. Its core mission was, as we've been talking about, European defence. All the rhetoric about goods to flow freely again, including between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, is just that rhetoric. So the sheer propaganda from 10 Downing Street, however, is off the charts. This is just one example of it. So on the top there, you can see what happens before the UK-EU deal, and on the bottom, after the UK-EU deal, and everybody's happy in the sunshine. It's unbelievable. So Starmer said yesterday, there's no impediment to e-gates at EU airports. And his regime is working on it, is basically what he was saying. We've now cleared the barrier and we're getting on with it. So we should be particularly excited about that. So he went on to say that, ladies and gentlemen, Britain is back on the world stage. Actually, according to the Facts for EU website, what he meant was that Britain is back in the EU cage, and I suspect that's probably pretty accurate. Starmer's triumphalism was, as we've said, off the charts. In the last 2 weeks alone, he said, we've delivered trade deals with India and the United States. That means jobs saved, jobs created, more growth, and a huge vote of confidence in this country, leading the way internationally, made Britain a place where people wanted to do business once again. That's his narrative. And why was he looking so glum then? He was looking so glum in all the photographs, and except when people were making the jokes. I don't know whether anybody was talking about fires or anything like that. But anyway, as usual with the EU, with EU related matters, nothing of substance was included in the British regime's press release. Instead, we had nonsense like this. So let's have a look at this. UK secures new agreement with the European Union to support British businesses, back British jobs, and put more money in people's pockets. In the UK press release also was, package will help make food cheaper, slash red tape, open up access to the EU market, and add nearly £9 billion to the UK economy by 2040, as if that's a lot of money over that period of time. And the Prime Minister hails the agreement as good for jobs, good for bills, and good for our borders. If you're still not throwing up at this point, let's have a look at what the EU, what their position was, because they produced this joint statement. We had to go to this to get the detail of the whole thing. And strangely enough, this joint statement doesn't seem to be on the UK government website. And if we compare the language from both sides, here's what the EU said then. EU will be overfishing in British waters until 2030. We will effectively be rejoining the single market for food and agriculture. It's going to tie the food sector in the UK to EU regulation. We're effectively rejoining the single market for energy and carbon pricing. And we're going to see the return of legislative parity. We never really saw that disappear. So the EU themselves said, I'm going to put Ursula on this, because although she didn't actually say it, it's coming out of the EU and out of her declaration. So I'm putting the quote against her name. We note the political agreements leading to full reciprocal access to waters to fish until 30th of June 2038, actually. Starmer, for his part, lied by saying this: we've reached a deal today on fish, protecting our access rights in fishing areas with no increase in the amount of EU vessels, the amount that EU vessels can catch in British waters. Anyway, the deal was done on Monday is only the start. Ursula let the cat out of the bag during the Q&A session in the press conference. Let's have a listen to what she said.
Your second question was on SAFE for the UK. Indeed, it's a two-step approach towards SAFE. The first precondition is a security and defence partnership. That has been concluded today. And it opens the door for the UK to participate in the joint procurement under SAFE. Then there comes the second step that is necessary to negotiate a second agreement. And here we detail out, it's again a process of detailing out, budget contribution, reciprocal market access, and rules on security of supply. And this will give, that's important, in the end, the UK industrial participation. This is the goal that we have together.
Well, on Gibraltar, the Commission and the...
So what we have there is the first step of the UK's participation in SAFE, as they call it now, SAFE being EU Defence Union. The second part, which is coming soon, will require Britain to make budget contributions, give contracts to EU companies, accept EU rules on defence industry, foreign policy, convergence and EU supervision of defence projects, which is all exactly what we've been warning about. And it, if we were ever really out in the first place, it certainly takes us right back in. But then the question is, what of Nigel Farage? Well, he's away. Sorry, let's go back one. He's away to France for a holiday. Where else would he go at this time other than the EU? The man, in my opinion, is a fraud and always has been. And, he is not interested in this issue anymore, as far as I can see. He's only interested in echoing what Donald Trump has to say. And as Brian Monteith says in The Scotsman, this is not a reset, not even a retreat. It's a capitulation, an unconditional surrender that changes the relationship beyond recognition. Well, I understand that sentiment, but I don't think it's any of those, because I think this was the plan from the beginning. There never was an intention to make Brexit work from any political leader or from any section of the Uni Party. And if you think that this is probably not the best idea that has ever been thought up, then you might like to sign the petition which Veterans for Britain has set up on the gov.uk petition site. The link will be in the show notes. And many watching this may feel like a referendum on the EU is the last thing they want to see. But I think this has to be resisted, and doing nothing is not resistance. But don't worry. If Starmer's holiday propaganda that I showed you at the beginning of this report isn't enough for you, yesterday he was visiting supermarkets to make sure we all believe that food prices will fall because of this fantastic deal. So we can go back to sleep now. What do you think?
Well, there's a lot to say. I mean, Hotel California springs to mind, and I think anybody that voted in sincerity to get out of the European Union will be scratching their head today. But the promises of more money at the same time as complaining about a 22 billion black hole and saying that only 9 billion will be returned to the economy in 15 years seems like pretty poor return. So I think there's a lot more to talk about on it, but it doesn't sound good.
Right. And so let's continue with sort of international things with a British flavour. And what's the latest on the Special Forces killings that we were talking about a week or two ago?
Yeah, indeed. Well, as I said last week, the report on extrajudicial killings by Special Forces, a decision on the appeal of the former Australian Special Forces soldier, was to be announced on Friday, and this related to a civil defamation case he brought against the journalist Nick Mackenzie. Now, Mackenzie had concluded from his protracted investigations that Robert Smith had committed murder while serving in Afghanistan, and Robert Smith therefore alleged defamation against Mackenzie. Now, the appeal was thrown out, which creates the bizarre legal situation of the federal court agreeing on the balance of probability that multiple murder has been committed. But because this is only a civil affair, Robert Smith faces no criminal sanction for now, at least. This is what Nick Mackenzie had to say about the decision.
Massive relief. It's an emphatic result, and I want to express my deepest gratitude to the brave SASR soldiers who've not only fought for their country in Afghanistan, but fought for the Australian public to know the truth, that Ben Robert Smith is a war criminal. It was always the story of these brave SASR truth-tellers. They saw Ben Robert Smith commit war crimes, and they were not prepared to have that covered up. It's a terrifying experience to be put before the full bench of the Federal Court, but ultimately the full bench of the Federal Court has scrutinised our journalism and, more importantly, has scrutinised the testimony of SASR soldiers who said what they saw. And the full bench of the Federal Court has found the truth, that Ben Roberts-Smith is a war criminal. You can't ask for a more comprehensive process than the full bench of the Federal Court. To have our journalism scrutinised fully, thoroughly, to have the testimony of our witnesses, those brave SASR soldiers, scrutinised yet again and yet again, the finding is utterly compelling. Ben Roberts-Smith did do these things. Ben Roberts-Smith is a war criminal. And I want to acknowledge his victims. There are Afghan women and children who've lost husbands, fathers, because they were murdered on the orders of Ben Roberts-Smith. They should not be forgotten in all this.
Now, the recent BBC Panorama programme called I Saw War Crimes claims to have taken the testimony of Special Forces veterans, though none has been named and actors were used for the filming. Reporting on this has been very limited, and there's been extremely little attention on the long-running independent inquiry relating to Afghanistan. But in late January, Lord Justice Haddon Cave, who's charged with running the inquiry, requested that witness November 1141 provided a statement which should have been due within 42 days, which would detail, among other things, an overview of the witness's career, his role as an OC, relationships with individuals and partner forces, serious incident reviews, and an alleged confrontation with another witness. Now, reference to this witness being an OC should mean that he was a squadron leader, which means that he's one of a very small number of people who were in that role. And given the situation with the Australian Special Forces, the reference to partner forces should be considered as particularly significant. In response to the request, the MOD witness legal team wrote to inform the inquiry that November 1141, quote, will be relying on his privilege against self-incrimination and will therefore not be providing a witness statement in response. No further explanation was provided, end quote. So the so-called privilege against self-incrimination is a theme. In March of this year, Haddon Cave released a statement about the obstruction to Obsestro, which is the military police investigation into the extrajudicial killings in the first place, which described how Soldier C refused to give oral evidence despite having complied with a request for a written statement. Such refusals to give evidence are a bad look for UK Special Forces, as they would appear to reinforce the point that they believe themselves to be above the law, not just in relation to killing non-combatants, but also with regard to acting in support of an apparently legitimate judicial process. And the reason for making that point is that the privilege referred to relates to a civil or a criminal case, but not to an inquiry, which is by nature inquisitorial rather than adversarial. So as a consequence, Lord Justice Haddon Cave has now mandated a response from November 1141, and I'll provide updates on this as and when. Now, not only has there been very limited coverage of this issue in the mainstream, but the Armed Forces hierarchy refused to touch it with a barge pole. And this is a point brought out in a piece in The Telegraph by ex-Army journalist James Jeffrey, who asks why no general will take responsibility. And the answer, as always, is that it's not politically expedient for them to do so. And to reinforce the point, I refer to the appointment of General Gwyn Jenkins as First Sea Lord, the probability of which I mentioned last week. Now, this is important because when he was Director of Special Forces, Jenkins is believed to have ordered Special Forces personnel to lean on civil servants in order to block Afghans from coming to the UK to give evidence in the Afghan inquiry. And again, as to be expected, the counter-narrative is being bolstered continually, and here we see the omnipresent Hamish de Bretton-Gordon writing for the British Forces Broadcasting Services that we should not rush to judgment on the allegation against Special Forces, which indeed may be the case, though it's quite clear that he's preparing the ground for public opinion to be such that a criminal trial, were it to go ahead, may well end up being prejudiced.
Yes, well, that will continue to rumble on, I'm quite sure, and with massive attempts to sweep it under the rug.
I think very desperate attempts, and I think the appointment of Gwyn Jenkins amidst this controversy absolutely telegraphs that precise intent.
Yes. Okay. Well, Vanessa, let's come to you now. Welcome to the program. And what's the latest that's going on in Syria, if we move there?
Actually, we keep on the theme of British interference abroad and talking about the unelected alleged president of Syria, Jolani, now known as Ahmed al-Shara. Of course, we can say that his grooming began in Camp Bucca, one of the CIA black sites in Iraq, after which he joined ISIS, and he then formed Al-Qaeda or Nusra Front in Syria, which was rebranded then as HTS, but is still adhering to the ideology of Al-Qaeda. So let's go back to 2021, and this was a PBS Frontline documentary called The Jihadists, which set the wheels in motion for the grooming of Jolani as political opposition.
He waged jihad in Iraq and Syria, accused of terror and torture.
You're a wanted man. There's a $10 million price tag on your head.
A former al-Qaeda commander says he's changed. Speaking to a Western reporter for the first time.
How is it that somebody is going to want to trust you?
Now on Frontline, correspondent Martin Smith investigates the jihadist.
And so now let's fast forward to 2025, May the 1st, and the former US ambassador to Syria from 2011 to 2014, who spoke before the Baltimore Council on Foreign Affairs. So let's have a listen to what he had to say.
So, starting in 2023, a British non-government organization which specializes in conflict resolution invited me to help them bring this guy out of the terrorist world and into regular politics. And at first, I have to tell you, I was very leery of going. I sort of had images of me in an orange jumpsuit with a knife to my throat. He never apologized for the terrorist attacks in Iraq or in Syria, although there were many fewer in Syria. Never apologized.
And just a very quick reminder with this image taken from an article that I wrote back in, I think, 2017. Here is Ambassador Ford in Syria with the Free Syrian Army, the alleged moderates, Colonel Okaidi in 2013. And on the right is the same colonel with a leader of ISIS, part of Omar the Chechen's group of fighters who led many of the attacks against the Syrian Arab army. Ford, in fact, was unceremoniously flung out of Syria when it became very apparent that he was there to incite the uprising against the then Syrian government. And I just want to have a look at another section from his talk in Baltimore. So let's have a look at this quick video.
None. I went to Syria in January. I met Ahmed Shara, the president then. When I saw him in the presidential palace, I said, never in a million years did I expect to see you here. And he kind of grinned and he said, well, I like to keep surprising you, Mr. Ambassador. He has a sense of humor. I don't normally think of Al-Qaeda as having a sense of humor, but anyway. So,
now, what I found quite interesting there is that he did say Al-Qaeda he didn't consider had a sense of humor, so he still obviously considers Jolani to be Al-Qaeda. So let's have a look. There were a number of articles outlining Robert Ford's visit to Syria, and this is just one of them, My Syria Visit, Rays of Hope and Fears for the Future. But he also mentions in the article this section, which if we can just have a look at the quote, I was delighted to accept an invitation from a British NGO to join them in a visit to a free Syria in the middle of January. So clearly he mentions back in 2023 that it was a British unnamed NGO that organized his talks with Jolani, and then he went with them in January of this year to Damascus. And then I just want to bring up the visit of the military attaché, Lieutenant Colonel Smith, that Brian mentioned on Monday. This was the visit to Damascus of the Lieutenant Colonel Charles Smith, military attaché, and where he met with the defense minister, alleged defense minister, Mahaf Abu Kasra. And just a reminder, of course, that Mahaf Abu Kasra, his roots lie in Al-Qaeda. He was an Al-Qaeda commander before he became a suited and booted member of the Al-Qaeda government that has been put into power in Syria by an international coup. And then I just want to focus a little bit on this Lieutenant Colonel Charles Smith. In November of 2024, he was in Lebanon with a military attaché group, if we can just bring that up. UK Defence Senior Advisor reaffirms Lebanese armed forces as the sole legitimate defender of Lebanon. So bear in mind, this was just before the ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel, which then precipitated us into the international coup that toppled the Syrian government. So very interesting timing. And Charles actually pointed out to me yesterday that there was a government report on a later visit to Damascus by Lieutenant Colonel Charles Smith, to Lebanon, in March of this year also. So he's obviously very active between Lebanon and Syria. And let's have a look at what was said in that meeting. This isn't actually what he said, but it's what was reported from the meeting. The meeting addressed opportunities for technical and military cooperation and mechanisms for developing the army structure to meet modern challenges. So British military getting involved in the so-called development of Syria post-coup, which, of course, the British were very much involved in. It was published in very few outlets, mostly Lebanese, Syrian, and this in the Jerusalem Post. So Israeli media, the source who works in the ministry's public relations department, added that the British visit may serve as a prelude to normalization with the current Syrian government. I would certainly agree with that. And then a reminder that a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the fact that there are British private military mercenaries basically on the ground inside Syria, and that the Syrian director of the Emerald Group was actually appointed again in November 2024. So at the same time as Lieutenant Colonel Charles Smith was conducting meetings with his colleagues in Lebanon. So interesting timing. I mean, that's pure speculation. I obviously don't have anything to tie them together except the timing itself. So let's have a quick look at a summary of what I've been talking about. So in 2021, we had the PBS interview with Jolani, the jihadist, where they definitely sort of trimmed his beard and put him in a suit and tried to legitimize him as political opposition. In 2023, a British NGO, unnamed, and Robert Ford visited Jolani to, again, continue the grooming project in March and September. 2024, November, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Smith in Lebanon, just prior to the ceasefire that led to, between Israel and Hezbollah, that then was led to the coup in Syria. 2024 again, Emerald PMC, Syria director, was appointed at the same time that Charles Smith was in Lebanon. 2025, January visit by Robert Ford, and again, this unnamed British NGO. And in 2025, again, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Smith visits Damascus with a view to securing a British military footprint alongside Al-Qaeda.
Thank you for that, Vanessa. We'll more Foreign Office related news later on. So thank you for that. Now, Sandi, let me welcome you to the programme. And of course, the other news that's come out in the last day or two is apparently a deal has been done on the at the World Health Organization, which Britain is absolutely part of.
Yes, yesterday, 20th of May in Geneva, the World Health Organization's member states quietly adopted the first ever international pandemic agreement, a global treaty that would reshape how public health, national law, and everyday freedoms operate in the future. Slovakia's abstention followed a challenge initiated by Prime Minister Robert Fico, who called for a formal vote rather than allowing the treaty to pass by consensus. Fico was known for his vaccine scepticism and concerns over national sovereignty. He instructed Slovakia's delegation to oppose the agreement. The WHO is not led by elected officials. You know, the Director General, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, holds office through diplomatic negotiation, not public vote. His record simply during the early COVID response sparked curious concerns about neutrality and transparency. You know, we have to remember that there was no vote from the people on this, no heated debates, no parliamentary oversight, no public referendum. Instead, it was adopted by consensus, literally the backdoor method of agreement that allows governments, including the UK, to silently nod their approval without needing to explain themselves to the people they serve. And this is what we're finding across the board. The foundation of this treaty is the WHO's One Health framework, an ideology that links human health to animals, the environment, even agriculture and land use. Under a broad lens, almost anything can be rebranded as a health threat. Climate change, farming practices, land ownership, all potentially within the scope. This fits in, obviously, with the broader UN 2030 17 goals agenda. And while the WHO cannot directly overrule national laws, the treaty even creates binding international obligations. Governments can now use it to justify emergency laws, sweeping powers, social restrictions, all under the shield of international compliance or global coordination, they call it. Even more troubling is who pays for the WHO's bills. As of 2023, the largest funders weren't democratic governments. They were private powerhouses, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Gavi, and various UN agencies backed by corporate interests. These donors now help set global health priorities without a single vote cast by the public. Among the treaty's more alarming features is the proposed pathogen access and benefit sharing PABS system. This would give the WHO rights to collect pathogen samples from any country and control their distribution under equity rules. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? The treaty also pushes for digital health certificates, a polite phrase for what could soon become global digital IDs, linked to your vaccination status. Not every country was on board, as I mentioned earlier, obviously, you know, Slovakia, but nations like Poland, Russia, Italy, Iran also were raising the alarm during the negotiations. Their objections were loss of sovereignty, a vague legal language, and the growing power of unelected institutions. In the UK, meanwhile, the silence has been deafening. There's been no real debate in Parliament, no public consultation, no clear explanation from the Prime Minister or the Health Secretary. Britain simply slid into the agreement without your voice, without your vote or your knowledge in some cases. This treaty marks more than a shift in health policy. It signals a deeper transformation, the move from national governance to a transnational management system. Decisions that affect your life are increasingly made by technocrats, foundations, and global agencies, and people can't elect. You know, these are people that you can't elect and you can't remove. So when COVID began, rapid emergency powers, top-down mandates, censorship, surveillance, the WHO Treaty now locks all those things into place internationally. Emergency governance is becoming the new normal. So here's a question we all must ask. If governments can sign binding global treaties without asking their people, who's really in charge during the next crisis? And there will be one, otherwise they wouldn't be doing all this. The answer increasingly is that you know, you didn't vote for these people, and they cannot hold you to account. I mean, when I read the treaty, the takeaway for me reading it, and you can find it online, is the pandemic agreement does not include any provisions that would give the World Health Organization powers to impose domestic public health decisions in the UK. The sovereignty of states is one of the guiding principles of the agreement. So bearing that in mind, you know, knowing that we're getting these consensuses globally, locally, that are not representative of the people they serve, this is all basically relying on our compliance, and we have to remember that. What do you think?
Sandi, thank you. Thank you for that. I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the UK government did release a press release to say that they had joined this, that they had signed and so on. But they, as you say, there was very little, if any, real mainstream coverage on it. And certainly the implications haven't been discussed in the mainstream media, and there is no national debate or discussion about it. So, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, it's nothing to do with health. I mean, I think that's the first thing to point out. And this is exactly what we saw in 2020. And people were blindsided, by and large, by what happened in the name of health. And this is just an extension of that. And of course, we mustn't forget that that's where this is traced back to in the immediate term. I mean, I think, we can talk more about this in Extra, but this says an awful lot more about the way that wider government of society is, well, I say working. I mean, it's not working because, as Sandi described, it's completely back to front. So I think there's this should absolutely send a shiver down people's spines if they're considering that we do live in a society where we, as the people who pay for and vote for elected representatives, are in any way in charge of what happens to us.
Yes, thank you. Oh, okay, well, let's move on. If you like what the UK Column does, we do need your support. I want to say a massive thank you to everybody that does support us. But if you go to our support page, you can make a donation there. You could join as a member. And if you do join as a member, you get access to view members-only content like UK Column News Extra and so on. Picking something up at the shop, of course, helps us as well. And if you buy something from Clive de Carl using the link on this page, then we do get a small commission for everything that you buy from him. But if you can't do that, please do share the material you find on the UK Column website. Share links are available, and that is massively helpful to get around the censorship regime in this country and around the world. Now, Christians in Cornwall.
Yes, indeed. Now, this is an interview with an accompanying article. It's about Truro Diocese, and it relates to the On the Way plan, which, to all intents and purposes, extends the lockdown policies in an effort to destroy congregations and Christian worship under the false pretext of a lack of funds, really diverting money towards the absurd net zero agenda and how to sort of push back via the PCCs. So worth getting into. And then next, an article about the steel, what's happened with the steel industry, and a description of the process by which government may purport to act in support of an entity or industry whilst actually doing everything in its power to subvert it. So a cautionary tale from a legislative and policy perspective.
And we shouldn't pass by the fact that you wrote it.
I did write it.
Yes, yeah. Okay. And Jerm tonight is going to be talking about the Titanic conspiracy. I'm going to be very interested in watching this because my uncle was the man who project managed the building of the massive cranes at Harland Wolff shipyard, where, of course, the Titanic was built. And while he was there in the 60s and 70s, the stories of the so-called Titanic conspiracy were absolutely rife at then. And of course, this is well before the internet ever happened. So watch Jerm's interview tonight at 7 p.m. live with John Hamer, if you can possibly join. I'm sure the discussion will be interesting. Now, a reminder of Stand in the Light is taking place this weekend in Gilgarran and Cumbria. So a last chance to get tickets and to go for that. So if you possibly can, get along to it. A reminder of the Sounds Beautiful Festival taking place in Wimborne and Dorset, 26th to 29th of June. And just to say that the ticket competition is now over, and the winner is Gongster Joe on Facebook. And so well done for Gongster Joe for winning those 2 free tickets. Look forward to seeing you on at the Sounds Beautiful Festival in June.
Great. Okay,
let's move on then to the situation with Lucy Connelly. Now, Lucy Connelly was jailed for 31 months back in October as a victim of the British regime's attack on free speech. And yesterday she had her appeal against her sentence turned down. Now, Connelly's tweets at the time were pretty reprehensible for sure, but the punishment way overboard, in my opinion, particularly when considered against the punishment given for other offences. And we'll come on to that in a second. The appeal judges considered that the trial judge had acted correctly. And in a sense, it's hard to disagree with that. But before you jump down my throat for saying that, just hear me out for a second, because what we have here, I think, is a perfect example of why juries are important, because the trial judge could only act based on the letter of the legislation. And it's in the legislation that we have to look for the injustice in this case. Connolly pled guilty, but if she'd been in front of a jury, she may well have been felt able to challenge the charge. And remember that a jury has the power to overturn bad legislation, which a judge does not, other than in very exceptional circumstances like incompatibility with the Human Rights Act. But the bottom line here is that it's the legislation which is the problem. And therefore, if there's going to be resistance to what happened to her and to others, including, for example, Peter Lynch, who was imprisoned under the same kinds of circumstances and hanged himself in prison, then the resistance has to be political. Now, the reaction on Twitter last night was predictable, perhaps. All the tweets were the same, or at least mostly the same, mentioning Huw Edwards, who got a suspended sentence for his crimes, and Mike Amesbury, former MP, who punched a constituent and who ended up with a suspended sentence on appeal and the requirement to do some voluntary work and an anger management course. So these comparisons that everybody was tweeting and retweeting last night came from Lucy's husband, Ray, who's a Tory councillor in Northampton Town Council. And so to end this segment, I just want to mention the BBC coverage of all this on this morning's Today programme. Presenter Anna Foster made these comments.
I note comments by Lucy Connelly's husband, Ray, in this case, and I wanted your take on a couple of those. He said that he thought the system wanted to make an example of her so other people would be scared to say things about immigration. And he also said Lucy got more time in jail for one tweet than some paedophiles and domestic abusers get. Is that the case here?
So she couldn't, as a BBC presenter, couldn't even acknowledge the fact that the paedophiles, that was only one paedophile being talked about on all the Twitter comments that I saw, and that was Huw Edwards. And because, of course, he was BBC himself, they didn't want to discuss that at all. I just thought that was a pretty pathetic effort by the BBC there. I wanted to mention that in passing. Let's come on to, Charles, to state threats.
Yeah, indeed. Now, the Counter-Terrorism Division of the Crown Prosecution Service have charged 3 Iranian men under the newish National Security Act, saying that they... we'll just animate that, saying it's extremely important that there should be no... We have authorised the Metropolitan Police Service to charge 3 Iranian men with offences under the National Security Act. And they go on to say that it is extremely important that there should be no reporting, commentary or sharing of information which could in any way prejudice these proceedings. Now, this prompted the Home Secretary to give a statement with an update on national security, in which she continued to push the point that Iran presents an existential threat to the UK, citing the meaningless statistic that MI5 has conducted more and more investigations into Iranians. She went on, though, to say this.
But we need to go further in strengthening our powers to address national security threats. Security Minister and I both warned of the increasing complexity of the threats we face. Threats from extremist and terrorist groups and individuals, including Islamist extremism and far-right extremism, continue, and vigilance and action against those remains crucial. But malign activities against us by or on behalf of foreign states have grown, and the threats we face have become more complex and intertwined. MI5 state threats investigations have increased by nearly 50% in a year. Policing investigations into state threats led by counter-terrorism policing are up 5-fold since 2018. And as well as growing, those threats are becoming more interconnected, and the old boundaries between state threats, terrorists and organised criminals are being eroded. We have seen malign foreign state organisations seek to exploit any vulnerability, from criminal networks to our cybersecurity to our borders, to do us harm. In our manifesto, we committed to stronger action on state-based security threats, and before entering government, the Foreign Secretary and I set out plans for the establishment of a joint unit to pursue and coordinate action. I can announce that the new State Threats Joint Unit is in place, with staff from across Whitehall driving a broader approach across government, building new partnerships with industry and academia.
Now, she speaks of interconnectedness, and it's this message that we're supposed to take away. MI5 has had ownership of the Joint State Threats Assessment Team since 2017. So here's another example of the plan for change translating as very much more of the same. Now, since the events in Southport last summer, the conflation of terrorism, extremism, and national security has gathered momentum, and not just here in the UK, although there still remains some confusion over the current situation. But in Germany, if AfD is conclusively classified as extremist, then the authorities may invoke powers to surveil them, which would otherwise not be available. So it can be no coincidence then that this falls at exactly the same time as David Clues of Unity News Network and Mark Collett of Patriotic Alternative, neither of which is a prescribed organisation, are being reported by the BBC as plotting to infiltrate the Reform Party with neo-Nazis. So this must be looked at as the perfect springboard for rolling out similar powers of surveillance for those organisations which are at that halfway house before prescription. Now, by way of context, of course, there's no mention of the fact that the Fabian Society has virtual total control of the government, an organisation in pursuit of smashing the system in order to impose a one world government. Now, ever since Michael Gove cooked up the new version of extremism, which bore a very striking resemblance to the criminal code of the Soviet Union of 1924, this has been the telegraphed progression. And as to the National Security Act, I think it must be noted that making the all-important link between UK activity and another state is at the heart of it, which is why there have been several references to the Swedish group Foxtrot Network, which is always being reported as being controlled by, of course, Iran. So I think there's no doubt that this agenda will develop, and we'll keep you up to speed with exactly how that works out.
Vanessa, let's welcome you back to the programme. And what's the FCDO been up to?
What, you mean more than normal?
Yeah.
And I love how they're prescribing someone as neo-Nazis while supporting neo-Nazis in Ukraine, but that's another subject altogether. Well, no, I think my curiosity was piqued by this unnamed British NGO that was basically helping, I'm quite sure at the behest of the UK Foreign Office, helping groom Jolani to be legitimate political opposition. So while I was searching for who this NGO might be, and of course we're probably going to be trying to raise an FOI on that subject, or at least contact the UK Foreign Office, I discovered this document, the UK Syria Development Partnership Summary, July 2023, and of course this was published under the 22 to 24 Sunak Conservative government. But two items in that document again rose up and sort of presented themselves to me. First of all is this novel idea of building local resilience in Syria, having basically destabilized, destroyed and devastated Syria since 2011 on purpose. So allegedly the program objective to address economic stress drivers of violence alongside social norms, et cetera, you can freeze frame it and read, I would say, the nonsense therein. But what's interesting is the program partners, the Food and Agricultural Organization, and undisclosed NGO partners. How often do we see that? And also that program is running through to 2027, which is interesting because that means basically it's, of course, under the auspices of the Al-Qaeda government in place since December 2024. Then I came across this program, which is Syria Independent Monitoring 2. And people might remember that to some degree, the largest, arguably non-NGO, operating in Idlib in particular alongside Al-Qaeda is the CIA MI6, created white helmets, started by a former British military intelligence officer in Turkey and Jordan in 2013, James Lemedra, who allegedly fell to his death from a roof in November, 2019. But can I just have that back on the screen for a second, please, Mike? So here we have to provide independent third-party monitoring of FCDO-funded projects in Syria, which of course include the white helmets, and to verify results reported by implementing partners. So the program partners are Co-Water and Landell Mills. The program date was the 16th of April 2020 to 15th July 2023. Budget 16 to 18 million. And as you and I, Mike, were discussing, where are these reports? Now, these reports are mentioned on the Co-Water website. So this is the Syria Independent Monitoring. And according to their website, they should be producing reports on independent project monitoring, assessment of FCDO implementing partners, monitoring and evaluation systems, thematic studies, inclusion and accountability to affected populations reports, and lessons learned. Now, as far as I can see, I cannot find hide nor hair of this report in any of the UK Foreign Office documents. I've written to Co-Water and Landell Mills to ask them where I might be able to find such reports that are funded by British taxpayer money. And presumably they would have investigated the White Helmet activities in Idlib in particular, because these organizations won't be operating anywhere else in Syria until after the coup of December 2024. So far, no reply.
What a surprise. And of course, the Foreign Office doesn't like to give replies to anything, but we'll keep you posted on that, keep everybody posted on that. Sandi, let me welcome you back. Now, this report we're coming back to the UK now and to so-called local democracy anyway. This report takes the column right back to the very beginning, because what's been going on at Somerset Town Council or County Council?
Well, it would appear that some money has disappeared, a lot of money has disappeared into a big black hole. The Life Factory, which was supposed to be a community hub in Glastonbury, was meant to be a vibrant space uniting music, arts, youth work, and small businesses under one roof, a shining sort of symbol of their regeneration project. And that was the promise of the Life Factory project at the Red Brick Building in Glastonbury. But that promise has collapsed into scandal. Instead of a finished community centre, what we've got is a half-built shell, angry unpaid local contractors, and a serious question: where has the money gone? The Life Factory was part of Glastonbury's £23.6 million town deal, a central government scheme to level up communities, and nearly £2.89 million of public money was awarded to transform this red brick building, Building C, into a creative hub with radio studios, youth services, therapy rooms, and more. Now, looking at those pictures, does it really look as though there's that there's that amount of money being spent on those buildings? I mean, nothing has been done on this building, and yet 2.89 million has literally disappeared. So in early 2004, Somerset Council, the body responsible for managing the town deal funds, froze all payments to the Red Brick project because serious concerns were raised over financial governance, poor invoicing practices, and a total lack of transparency about where the money was going. That triggered an urgent audit by the Southwest Audit Partnership, SWAP, a group that investigates how public money is spent, and what they found was damning. The audit uncovered complete collapse in governance. If you break it down, there was no match funding was ever secured, despite being a core condition of the grant. There was no fully costed project plan, no clear timeline, invoices couldn't be matched to work, financial records were missing, procurement rules were ignored, informal staffing arrangements, and no evidence of competitive quotes for even basic checks. The Red Brick Building and its spin-off company, Beckery Construction, failed every standard of good financial management, but Somerset Council didn't escape the blame either. They kept signing off payments even when the red flags were already raised. Meanwhile, the contractors were left unpaid, and this is the sad human story. One firm, R4 Scaffolding, said they worked for months in good faith and they never got paid. One subcontractor said around 40 people are owed money, a lot of money. And heartbreakingly, a local man named Jonathan Wilkins told the town council he lost his wife to suicide, in part due to the financial stress this project caused him. Now, this is just awful. This isn't just about paperwork, it's about real people's lives being torn apart by institutional incompetence. Building C still stands half-built, it's derelict, it's exposed. Structural engineers now say the wooden frame could soon deteriorate beyond repair if action isn't taken. There's still no roof, no planning permission, no BAT licence, no contractor, nothing in place to finish the job. Now, a Conservative councillor, Lily Osborne, said they have drawn down a huge amount of money with very little scrutiny. This public money, and the public have a right to know what's going on with it. The chair of the Red Brick Building, ex-mayor and Green councillor, XR member, Indra Don Francesco, is accountable for this project. She said, "We are concerned that there was not enough funding left in the budget to get the roof on." Well, that's kind of the first thing you do, isn't it? "We did our own internal audit and paused a lot of things," like finishing the building, "and made a lot of changes and made a lot of savings." Well, for who? This is not just a failed project, it's a public embarrassment. So who's to blame? The audit makes it clear both the Red Brick Building Centre and Somerset Council should share the responsibility. The Red Brick team ran an operation with no proper financial procedures, no governance between the main organisation, and no match funding. The body that is supposed to safeguard the public money approved the payments. I mean, it was a total incompetence. Now, interestingly, they've admitted, failures. It was the taxpayers' money, your money, my money, spent to regenerate this building. Instead, it's vanished into this black hole of bad management and buck passing. The question is now simple. I mean, who is actually going to be accountable for all this? Now, I want to take a good look at the Town Deal chairman, Dr. Lynn Sedgemore, CBE. Lynn is a qualified teacher and has an MSc in change agent skills strategies. Well, no common purpose training there. She was awarded the CBE in 2004. She's a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts, a fellow of the Institute of Directors, and is a chartered marketeer and headed up the Anne Frank Trust UK. Interesting, she's married to John Capper, who was the director of the Beckery Construction Company that was employed to finish the job from May 2022 to November 2023. So, it sounds like a bit of nepotism going on there, or some sort of vested interest. Lynn Sedgemore, CBE, is executive director also of the 157 group of further education colleges, and has advised Whitehall on a range of projects, including leadership, innovation, community, and interfaith cohesion. The 157 group exists to serve its members and to be at the leading edge of sector more widely on 3 levels: thought leadership, setting out visionary challenges and radical agendas for how things might be done; practice improvement; and policy influence, using the experience of our members to directly inform the views of government and policymakers, government bodies and agencies, academics and other influencers. So the people of Glastonbury are not going to let this one rest. We will find justice for the people who've been devastated by this fiasco. It's absolutely dreadful.
Thank you, Sandi. Thank you. Now, let's move on back to health matters, in fact. And, first of all, BioNTech. Well, first it was Starmer's, let's put it this way. It was Starmer's announcement of personalised medicine for cancer treatments. That was announced at the beginning of the year, enabled by AI-driven data centres. Then it was Operation Stargate, announced by Larry Ellison at Trump's inauguration. For exactly the same reason. Now COVID-19 vaccine pioneers BioNTech, and I say that with deep sarcasm for the avoidance of doubt, have announced a commitment to a 10-year, up to £1 billion investment in the UK, and this is for new research and AI centres to be established in London as well as Cambridge. And Starmer's government claims that this demonstrates the benefits of the Oxford-Cambridge growth corridor, right? BioNTech says they will develop the next generation of life-changing medicines underpinned by up to £129 million of government support. And this agreement underscores the government's commitment to life sciences as a key part of the plan for change. This is their language that they use. Driving improvements in healthcare and delivering economic growth. The government is crowing about what a great deal this is, citing the Academy of Medical Sciences, who report that every £1 spent on medical research delivers a return of 25p every year forever after that. What a business model, Charles. Almost as good as perpetual war, which is the other major business model the current British regime is pursuing. But that means They've covered their costs in 4 years, and everything for eternity is profit, sheer profit from then on. Incredible.
Absolutely. So they'll be licking their lips at the prospect of going back into the European Union.
But sticking with AI.
Sticking with AI, indeed, yes. Now, I was reporting on the situation last week of the deliberate policy of creating water scarcity, and the Labour MP, Bell Ribeiro Addy, during UK Column News, created a rather awkward atmosphere during Prime Minister's questions last week by asking about the potential impact of AI on the environment. Now, the reply from the Permanent Undersecretary made reference to the long-term sustainability and the creation of the AI Energy Council. The government expects, quote, the council will also look at clean energy like renewables and nuclear, advising on improving energy efficiency and sustainability in AI and data center infrastructure, such as the use of water, end quote. Now, as well as the energy operators, the council includes Google, Microsoft, and Amazon Web Services. So I think we can take an educated guess at which version of sustainability that we are going to get. Now, at the same time as insisting that we can harness the power of the sun via solar panels, the government, of course, is funding research into how to block the same sun. And now, as it tells people to conserve water, the government is desperately pushing to create technology that's projected to use as much as 2/3 of the whole of the UK's water supply. A recent announcement about AI growth zones has caused some people at last to scratch their heads, and the guidance references the availability of water as being a technical consideration. Now, specifically, enough water to satisfy 500 megawatts of AI infrastructure, and the issue therefore becomes rather straightforward. It's one of priority. So what form does the written confirmation from a water supplier take? And if there is a water shortage, does a data center assume that priority over the people or animals who might need to drink it? So if the data center is there at all, then presumably there's no point in its existence if it's to be switched off periodically. So with that in mind, I think the question is, why does the burden for the provision of water not fall upon either the government, whose bright idea these growth zones are, or indeed the businesses which intend to build the data centres? Now, as has been pointed out by The Guardian, among others, it's a mighty coincidence that the data centre proposed for Culham in Oxfordshire will be just a stone's throw from the proposed reservoir at Abingdon. So, as is exactly the case with electricity, the inference here is that AI will only work if you stop using all of its electricity and water. And finally, it should be noted that Microsoft has trialled successfully and used an undersea storage of data centers for cooling, something that the Chinese continue to do. Now, on screen here is Project Natick or Natick in Scotland, and despite the abundance of seawater in Scotland, Microsoft have decided that they're not going to go further with it, and one can only imagine this is because it's easier and cheaper to abstract all of the rest of the water, which the taxpayer will be providing for them. So I think an area that we will have to keep people updated on, such as the government's push and push and push for AI being the answer to absolutely everything.
Yes, okay. Well, let's move on then to the MHRA, because yesterday, you'll all be glad to know, it was International Clinical Trials Day. And to celebrate that, the new chief executive of the MHRA, Lawrence Tallon, has been reflecting. And this is how he reflected. He said, clinical trials don't just help us determine whether a medicine is safe and effective. They lead to better care outcomes for participants overall. He was reflecting this on some kind of MHRA blog post, but he said, we want to go further in cementing the UK as one of the best places in the world to conduct trials for both patients and researchers. Last month, he said, we began implementing the most significant update to UK clinical trials regulation in over 2 decades. These reforms will address the research sector's need for more efficient, streamlined and adaptable regulatory framework for clinical trials. In other words, to make the regulation as lightweight as possible, all at the same time that other areas of regulation are coming down ever stronger on organisations. But anyway, he went on to say, and of course, they will help us get cutting-edge new treatments to patients and the NHS as quickly as possible. And of course, keep the profits rolling in. He didn't specify that, but I'm quite sure that's what he was meaning there. We've also seen some exciting developments in the use of artificial intelligence, which could speed up vital parts of our clinical trial application review from 3 hours to just 35 seconds. Brilliant. I mean, what more could you wish for? And finally, he said, of course, it's not just about getting trials set up quickly. It's important that trials in the UK are innovative and inclusive too. To support this, we've recently launched a pilot inclusion and diversity plan with the Health Research Authority. The next year will be an exciting one for UK trials as the government pushes forward its life science vision and 10-year health plan. Our reforms could not come at a more important time. The MHRA just gets better and better. Charles, I'm quite sure we'll be talking a little bit about that in Extra as well.
I think we absolutely will. And we come to the last part of today's show, which is the news that the Ministry of Defence are pleased to announce that they have created a method of sticking things together underwater. Yes, indeed. Could a new underwater glue give the UK the competitive advantage in a theatre of conflict? It's scarcely believable, but at a time where billions of pounds are going out the door to fund conflict in Ukraine, and we're talking up the state threat with Iran, the Ministry of Defence apparently now believes that the answer to everything could be to be able to stick things to other things underwater, and they are claiming that this, in time, might well save lives. Now, whether or not that would have prevented or been able to fix the connection problem we had on the stream earlier in the programme is something we'll just have to leave hanging. But there we go.
Yes. Okay. Well, look, thank you, Charles. Thank you, Vanessa and Sandi. And thanks to everybody that watched. Sorry for the technical problems earlier. We'll be back in a few minutes for some Extra. Join us for that if you can. There'll be an interview going out at 1 p.m. tomorrow, and we'll be back for the news on Friday. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.